gets into a really bad car accident. The man rushes from work over to the hospital. The doctor comes out. He goes, sorry, it's really bad news. Your wife was in a horrible car accident. Her face and body are totally mangled. She'll be crippled and paralyzed from the neck down. She's going to need a 24-hour care, of which your insurance is not going to pay for. You're going to have to wash her and feed her and keep turning her over in case she gets bed sores and rubbing ointment on her. And you'll have to change her pretty constantly because she'll have no control over her bladder or bowels. And the man breaks down crying. And the doctor goes, I'm just fucking with you. She's dead.
Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Carnival Personnel Sideshow. I'm Jacques.
I'm Joe.
And Joe, why don't you tell the fine people why we're here? First of all, go ahead. Tell people why we're here.
Well, as everybody heard through Jason Alexander's Twitter, Gilbert Gottfried died this week. Kind of out of the blue. Another contemporary of Norm Macdonald's. I guess had an illness that he kept secret and was battling quietly for, I don't know, for some time. And I guess he was, I think, in good spirits up to about a week ago, because I saw that somebody posted a cameo that he did from a week or so prior to his death. And he was, Gilbert as usual. So, yeah, Gilbert Gottfried is gone. He was 67. He died from a complication from a type of muscular dystrophy, which was, in my mind, I immediately went, oh, that's why he was nice to Jerry Lewis.
He was you know what? He was nice to Jerry Lewis because
he was always nice to me.
So, Joe and I have been doing, trying to do comedy together for a while, and Gilbert is somebody that we both. It's one of those things when we would tell people what fans of Gilbert we are. I think a lot of people like, really? I don't think people know how great and well-rounded he is because you hear the voice, which is very off-putting to some. Management, for instance. There's been times I've said, oh, here's somebody you have to listen to this podcast, and she just couldn't. There's no right way to start, this, so we'll just dive right in. Biff, by the way, isn't as versed in the Gilbert universe as Joe and myself, so he's like, yeah, why don't you guys just do this? So anyways, where do we start, Joe? Where do we start?
Oh boy, well, I guess you start at the end. He's dead.
He's dead.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Now you work backwards. All right. He got an illness.
It's funny that you said he's dead. It kind of made a joke about it. And there was a bunch of comedians who were making Gilbert dying jokes. And all of them said, man, Gilbert would have loved that.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I thought that Affleck kind of missed an opportunity to make a tasteless joke about Gilbert's death.
Right. Seriously.
They could have finally gotten some sort of like poetic justice in the end, but no, they took the higher road, apparently. So, yeah, I mean, where do you start? I rewatched the Gilbert documentary from 2017. It was free on Pluto TV, so I had to watch it with some commercial interruptions, but, it was okay. But they left, it wasn't censored or anything. But so you got to hear all of it. You got to hear him, doing his famous Aristocrats joke at the Hugh Hefner roast a week after 9/11. As he was trying to dig out from a hole he had dug himself by making a 9/11 joke where famously he said, I wanted to make a direct flight from here to LA, but I can't because we have to make a stop at the Empire State Building. And, immediately too soon groans. This is literally a month after 9/11.
Right.
In New York City.
In New York City.
And so then he just says, fuck it. And he goes into the Aristocrats joke, which nobody outside of the comedy world might have even known what the fuck he was doing, because that was a joke that was only told amongst comedians, like in the back rooms. And it's sort of like this, now because of the documentary, the Aristocrats exposing what the joke was, that it's like this. It's basically jazz for comics where they could just come up with the most obscene, gross, wrong things to say about a family act, trying to pitch their show idea and their act to a talent agent. And yeah, it put Gilbert on the map yet again. You know?
Penn and Teller produced that Aristocrats movie, right?
I think they were part of it. Paul Provenza was the director, but maybe Penn Jillette. I think Penn Jillette had a major hand in that.
If anyone hasn't seen the Aristocrat documentary, you have to. And it's great because I think you said it the other day that Gilbert Gottfried is a comedian's comedian.
Yeah, somebody, I think I stole that tweet from Frank Conniff, TV's Frank from Mystery Science Theater, who posted that. I think it was him. But yeah, he was just above and beyond any comedian. I mean, we said the same thing about Norm Macdonald when he passed, that he was just like a unique voice, and he was. But Gilbert, I mean, I think Norm was reverent to Gilbert's genius because he was just that kind of comedian. You know, he was just the guy who, and it even in the documentary, they say, you don't tell Gilbert what not to say because he'll only want to say that thing. So I don't know. I mean, I can go as far back as you want with Gilbert Gottfried history, I guess.
So we'll go back to our beginning. So Joe and I are doing a comedy show, cable access show.
Comedy in 17 quotation marks, by the way.
And I think it might have been the first impression that you did. You know,
Al Caprillion might have been the first one.
Al Caprillion. He's a local weatherman in the New England area, for somebody who doesn't know. Dude, completely on the spectrum. Kind of talks a little like Gilbert, to be honest.
And Gilbert was probably on the spectrum.
And, yeah. And so Joe would do, a really good Gilbert.
No. I did Gilbert.
It's one of those things. Everybody thinks they can do a Gilbert, but yours is pretty good. And we've done Self-Indulgent Theaters on this podcast where you've sung songs as Gilbert. No, you have a good Gilbert. But way back and I want to say 94, 95, we did an episode of our show where we did USA Up All Night. And we made a really bad, like, Skinamax kind of movie trailer.
Yeah, I forget what we actually produced them. Did we actually do a movie?
You know what? Hold on. Let me jog your memory. Let me get out of this restrictive clothing.
Oh, God, yes.
Is it coming back to you?
All right, yes, and the bad editing and all that, yes. Right, it was the cheesiest, like, hack porn parody kind, or softcore parody.
Yeah. We had some cute girl, like a friend of one of the cast members, like sister's friend or something, and she was great.
Was she Emma Sherbet?
Emma Sherbet was the character's name, but it'd be like, somebody would say a line, hold for a second, and then you would hear cut.
Right, yeah, and then I played Gilbert as doing the intro, a la his stint on USA Up All Night. Which, if you don't know USA Up All Night, then you weren't masturbating in 1990. That's what I think anybody with basic cable who didn't have access to what would be the internet 5 years or 10 years.
Well, if you didn't have HBO or Showtime, you have basic cable and you have the USA Network. This was as close to porn, soft porn, as you could get.
Yeah, it was Friday nights and Saturday nights. I think, what was it? Gilbert did a stint from like 88 to like 92, 93, and then Rhonda Shear took over, or was it the other way around?
Which it was great because when we were talking about doing the podcast, which I did, I called Joe. Actually, Joe broke the news to me. I was at the gym with my oldest, and my wife called. I let it go to voicemail. She called like a couple minutes later. I saw a text, and then I saw Joe called. And I'm like, oh shit, this must be something's going on. Yeah. And Joe broke the news to me, and I walked right outside, and we talked about it for like 10, 15 minutes. And I'm like, look, we got to do a podcast. I promise, and I'm sticking to it. I'm not going to ask you to do the Gilbert voice.
It's just going to come out. I think it already came out.
You can't. Right? I was going to say that, but and one of the things. So going back to the sketch comedy show we did, and again, it was like 94, 95, and I remember you saying it then, and you said it the other day when we were talking. You had these softcore, like movies for teenagers. And at the same time, the biggest boner killer, introducing, going in and out of all the commercial breaks, Gilbert's grating voice.
And Gilbert, he himself would admit that he would be at home jerking off to these movies if he weren't hosting the intros and outros. It would be like Ski School or, maybe like an edited version of Fast Times or something like that.
It was so that was way back then, and
I remember the line that I was embarrassed to say then, and should I say now?
Sure.
I think. Oh God forgive me, and please don't cancel me. But I said as I was doing the Gilbert voice, and I was kind of fumbling my way out of it, kind of like the way I close out every podcast that I'm part of here. When I got to the end, I go. You'll enjoy this movie, or you won't. I don't care. Sue me. You know how us Jews like to get sued. I'll be hearing from you in the mail, like that.
Which again is something that Gilbert, if he had ever heard or seen the skit, he would be rolling.
Right, anything with Jews and suing.
Oh, and he loved. I mean, so that was the beginning of Joe and I doing comedy, and him doing that, and. Joe and I always talk about there's just things that we say every day in our life or that we pick up from movies, pop culture places that are flashpoint touchstones in our life where I can just text him one line or I can just say one thing. And there's a good half a dozen things that we have taken from the Gilbert universe and we use on an almost every conversation basis. Let me start. Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think everybody who listened to his podcast kind of picked up on how he wasn't very good at accepting compliments, giving compliments, interacting with people, this, that, the other thing. And so eventually, through his wife, kind of training him on how to be a normal person, I think they finally settled on a phrase or a way of accepting a compliment from a fan, like, "Hey, Gilbert, I'm a huge fan and I really enjoy your work." And his stock response would be, "Oh, thank you."
Because before, I mean, he had his podcast. He was kind of early to the dance of podcasting. He started his podcast in 2014. Gilbert Gottfried's colossal, amazing colossal podcast. And he hosts it with a writer, Frank Santopadre. And it's true. If somebody tried to compliment it, he would turn it around or just make a joke or make it awkward or just like, "Oh, you were great in this. Oh, your CNI dog was lying." It's like, and so finally, I think, like you said, his wife and his co-host at one point said, "Hey," because the show started. I liked the show in the beginning. The show, Gilbert has, what do you call it? Like this recall with movies and TV shows that a made-for-TV movie in 1968 that he saw once, he can quote verbatim
and sing the theme song too.
Like it would creep people out and make them delightful, but they also be like, "Wait a minute, is that on Apple iTunes? How do you know that song?" He would hear a song once and know it, but he loved the character actor. That's what he was. And I just remember one of the first times Joe was early to the dance with the podcast, and I checked it out, and I liked the show Car 54, Where Are You? And they had like some bit. It wasn't one of the main two characters. I don't think it was a guy in the opening credits, but they had an actor who maybe did 4 or 5 episodes of that show and 2 or 3 episodes of The Munster, and they would read the guy's IMDb page, or they would have a henchman from the original Batman show who turned out to be a henchman in 2 episodes with the Riddler, and then he was a henchman for 2 episodes with the Joker. Like, and it was great. But then they started to get bigger and bigger name actors, and I think the show started to get bigger, and it stopped being so niche, with the bigger names and stuff. And I think that's when his wife and his co-host was like, okay, we gotta. You're on the spectrum. We understand that, but let's kind of
let's narrow that spectrum a little bit. Let's kind of get like a little laser focus on your behavior. So, yeah, but going back to his humble beginnings, I guess he grew up in Brooklyn. Father was a hardware store owner guy. Mother was I forget if the mother had like a side job or something, but he also had 2 sisters. And quiet kid, obviously sat in front of a TV most of his childhood. And then at age 15, he got up the gumption to decide to maybe try stand-up comedy. And then he eventually started getting paid a little bit to do stand-up comedy, like in his late teens. And, parlay that into a name. Eventually, he got cast as part of the replacement cast for the Not Ready for Primetime Players on Saturday Night Live. He was part of the infamous Gene Dumanian season 6 of SNL from I think that was 80 to 81.
1980, 81, yeah.
And the story goes, as Gilbert would say, he didn't write for himself, and he didn't know how to interact with other writers to put him into sketches. So they would put him in a couple of things. But then towards the end of the season, as Gilbert recalled once, they were doing a sketch about a funeral, and he played the body and the casket. That's how low they probably thought of him, or just basically had no use for him in their eyes. And then he goes on to tell the story about how he found out he was fired, where they were all called to, I guess, it was Dick Ebersol's office. And I think Dick Ebersol was taking over for Gene Dumanian, who got fired. And they were going to go through the cast and just sort of like let them know what's going on. And as he's waiting to go into the office, he goes by a table that has a lot of fan mail. And he sees one letter for him, which is kind of unusual for Gilbert Gottfried on Saturday Night Live. So he opens it up. And he reads it from like a girl in Wisconsin. That reads, "Dear Gilbert, I'm so sorry to hear that you were fired from Saturday Night Live."
Oh, I did not know that story.
And he's waiting in line to hear about what his fate is going to be.
Oh,
yeah, and so it's brutal. So, but he recovers, and he goes on to do more stand up, and then he kind of like falls out of the light. He goes to do a Thick of the Night. Alan Thicke's Thick of the Night TV show. He's like the guy in the rafters, kind of like almost like Chris Elliott.
Chris Elliott was Dave Letterman's Man Under the Floor.
Yeah.
He was Alan Thicke's Man in the Rafters.
Yeah, and it was, again, another failed experiment of a comedy show, but it kept him kind of in the sights of Hollywood enough to kind of carry him on to eventually get cast. I don't know if his big, I guess his first big movie was Beverly Hills Cop 2 as the guy who tries to bribe Eddie Murphy. And it's basically a 2-minute scene that you can see the scene on YouTube. And, but that it shows the Hollywood and a much larger audience. Oh yeah, look at this weird, funny guy with a funny voice. Maybe he's good for something.
Maybe there's something here. Right. And never a huge star, but never out of work really. It's funny again. So you got to watch the Aristocrats documentary. It's great. His documentary is great. And it is funny how, as much as like he would make, Jews are cheap jokes, he would always, was it his hoarding or was it his cheapness? He would take buses to shows. He didn't fly. He would rather take a bus and save like $50 on airfare. But in the documentary, he hoarded all like the bar soap and the shampoo from would
hotels.
Ask for, can I get extra soap and shampoo? I want to take 2 showers today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it stems from. I'm guessing there must have been some sort of like passed down, like almost like depression era mentality of saving money or not spending, just not spending on things that you didn't have to spend money on. But he carried that,
but he never used it.
Well, he wouldn't, especially with himself. I'm sure, like, you know, they lived in a pretty nice apartment. You know?
No, but I'm talking like the soaps and shampoo.
Oh, right.
Like
Yes.
It
was clearly an obsession. And in the documentary, you see his wife, while Gilbert's out of town, going through bins that are tucked under their bed, stocked full of bar soaps and deodorants and all travel size, you know, accoutrement of hygiene.
And so when Joe says he was out of town, he was cutting back and forth to interviewing the wife at the apartment, to him getting on a bus to go to a show like 8 hours away. And the people at the Greyhound bus station is that Gilbert Gottfried?
Yeah,
like, why is he on the bus?
He posed for pictures with like passengers and stuff. And like, yeah, he would take a megabus to the airport. Like they wouldn't, if a car was being hired, great. If not, he's taking the megabus. He's not hiring a car. He didn't know how to drive. He didn't drive a car. There's a famous story about Gilbert Gottfried being picked up to go to a dinner party at Amy Heckerling's house back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I won't spoil the whole story, but Amy Heckerling had a nanny who also like ran errands for her, you know, as well. And one of the errands was to pick up Gilbert Gottfried from the airport to bring him to the house for the party. And she's, I guess, the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. And for some reason, she thought that because Gilbert's Jewish, that she would feel comfortable telling him this fact about her family. And the first thing that Gilbert thought in his mind was like, what an awful weird thing to like break the ice about. You know, just because we're both Jewish doesn't mean we want to all automatically talk about the worst thing to happen to the Jewish people. But she felt like she had to bring this up to Gilbert. And so he just laid into her in his Gilbert way, like, oh, well, how do they stay so thin? You know? And then this story got out, you know, back and forth. And eventually this story was told on the Howard Stern show. And then 2 weeks later, the nanny called into the show, and Gilbert was invited back to relive that encounter. And it's like one of the most classic moments on Howard Stern between Gilbert Gottfried, Amy Heckerling, and Amy Heckerling's nanny about, you know, this odd encounter and how Gilbert was, you know, too cheap to get a car and all of this stuff. But then basically like and then continuing the Holocaust jokes about her parents on the air to this woman on the phone.
The thing is, you can't shame Gilbert Gottfried, like because he is the king of, oh, you're gonna make fun of me? Well, buckle up, because I know shit that you can't possibly imagine. I'm more fucked up than you'll ever imagine, and here it is.
Oh, I mean, there was another story where he was booked to open for, I don't know if it was Belinda Carlisle or the Go-Go's. I want to say Belinda Carlisle, and the audience is full of like, you know, teenage girls waiting for Belinda Carlisle.
His audience,
right?
Wheelhouse.
His people. So, of course, the producers and the stage manager kind of brief him like, okay, you know, it's kind of a younger audience, so I know your routine can be kind of raunchy, so maybe try to keep it a little clean. Of course, he gets up on stage, and he probably says the C word about 50 times. And he tells the story on the air on the Howard Stern show. So, I mean, and just to wrap up the Howard Stern thing.
No, don't wrap it up, because the Howard Stern stuff is huge.
Yes, huge.
I mean, It was just a few years ago. I don't know what. Oh, for some reason, did Andrew Dice Clay die? Is he dead?
No,
you know?
he's alive.
But for some reason, you forwarded me Gilbert Dice Clay.
Yes, Gilbert Dice Clay. I think it was born on the radio show, and then in 1990, Howard Stern had the Channel 9 WOR show in New York that competed with Saturday Night Live. It was an 11 p.m. show, but it was, you know, live to tape, and it it was a video version of his radio show, but it was completely produced outside of the radio studio. And so they would have, celebrity, quote unquote, celebrity guests come on. And Gilbert was one of these guests. And he was there to, I guess, kind of roast and rib this. In 1990, it was kind of, I guess, to Howard and his audience, maybe funny to have a comic come on who claimed to be like a gay comedian. Well, he was a gay comedian, but he was a like kind of a very green, bad stand-up.
Painful. I remember this.
I forget the guy's name, but they brought him on, and unbeknownst to this comic, they also brought in Gilbert Dice Clay, which is Gilbert wearing a huge, oversized leather jacket with like bedazzle on there, a la, Andrew Dice Clay. And he would come out and he'd be like, what are you, Homer? Whoa! Hey, hickory dickory donkey, and he would just
so obnoxious,
very obnoxious. And he would have a lit cigarette, and he would like try to smoke it, and it would just be, he'd be like, it's like Andrew Dice Clay meets Gilbert Gottfried meets Tourette syndrome.
That poor kid had no idea what was coming.
Yeah, and he was just trying to like, hold his own, but he was like, the flop sweat was visible on this poor comic. And Gilbert just had a field day. He also went on his Gilbert Dracula or Dracula Gottfried. And he would do he loved horror movies and loved
the old ones, old Hollywood.
Yes, the Universal monsters, and he loved doing the Bela Lugosi voice of Dracula. And the speech that he would love to do goes, "Come to me, children of the night. Home I have no home."
He did. He loved the old Hollywood, and when he would have kids on of famous people from like the 30s or 40s, and he used to talk about that. It's like TV stars were, look, that's a TV star, but movie stars, people on this big screen from the 30s, 40s, even the 50s and the 60s, he just like had such reverence for. I'm trying to remember.
He was his favorite of the monster actors was Lon Chaney Jr.
Lon Chaney Jr., right?
The Wolfman. And I wasn't a big monster guy, and I kind of tuned out a lot of times when they would talk about the monster stuff
because he would go down a rabbit hole, and even the other. And it's funny because he'd have guests on as soon as like, "Oh, were you a big monster kid growing up?" "No, I wasn't into the movies." He'd be dialed out like basically pissed his Cheerios. He had no interest in talking to you after that.
Yeah. Although, who was a huge like monster head, and I think, has a collection of memorabilia that Gilbert would be jealous of, is Kirk Hammond from Metallica. And they had him on as a guest, and they talked monster movies for like 2 hours straight. It was like, one of the greatest experiences that Gilbert probably had.
Did you know our 1 degree of separation from Gilbert?
No.
He had Kathy, the author of the Paul Lynde book, on his podcast.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you have it. So
well, I'll be.
Because I think, is that what you found out about the Paul Lynde book, maybe from her being on the podcast?
You know what? Subconsciously, maybe, I know that they did a lot of like smaller shows for Patreon only, and I wasn't part of that. But I thought maybe I must have listened. Because
Kathy had posted, her in the studio with, Gilbert and Frank.
Wow.
Promoting the book.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh. And then she did our podcast, like, how the mighty have fallen.
No, what are you talking about? We're great. We're great. Why are you saying here we're not so good?
Another thing about Gilbert, he really didn't care. Like, he had Hollywood friends. Like, him and Alan Thicke were really good friends.
So good that they actually did an episode of Wife
Swap, right?
Where, if you remember Wife Swap.
Vaguely. I never watched it, but I knew of it.
It was a show. It was a reality, one of the quote-unquote reality show on ABC, where the two celebrities, usually male, I think. I don't know. Sometimes they would do the female, male. I don't know what they did. But they would swap wives. They would live in each other's homes, quote-unquote, for about a week. and a camera crew would follow them, and you would see their antics. So it would be Gilbert Gottfried living with Alan Thicke's wife and family, and Alan Thicke, God rest his soul, living with Dara and maybe, I don't know, I think they had children at that point. But
yeah, they did. Yep.
And it was funny because
but small. The kids were small.
Alan Gilbert did an impersonation of Alan Thicke singing his theme song to Thick of the Night. Living in the thick of the night, living in the thick of the night. And it was just this very weird, exaggerated version of Alan Thicke, but kind of accurate. And he would sing that to Alan Thicke's wife, and she goes, he doesn't sound like that. And so they pull up the theme song, and it's almost the same way as Gilbert sang, and it's like, I guess he does sound like that. Gilbert was a great mimic. Great mimic. I mean, the Jerry Seinfeld voice. Why do you, who are these people?
So Joe and I obviously love the Marx Brothers and everybody, and I saw so many people on Twitter say Gilbert's the only one who would have the creativity and the balls, because people have such reverence for the old Hollywood people, to do old Groucho and his impression of. And it's funny because Joe doing his impression of Gilbert doing old Groucho. Very few things in my life give me the joy, because sometimes Joe will just say a line, and then sometimes Joe will just go on, and there's no stopping it. And the longer he goes on, the more I enjoy it. And it's just Gilbert. Like, who else would do in the year 2020? Who else? I mean, because again, I mean, like I said, when his podcast started, he would have these 80-year-old people on who were big characters in TV shows he liked growing up from the 50s and the 60s. And then it, as it goes on, when he got bigger, but everybody knows Groucho, but nobody knows old Groucho. And then if you go, it's almost like looking up the Alan Thicke stuff with his wife. His impression of old Groucho was spot on.
Specifically, Groucho Marx appearing on the 1970s Dick Cavett show, because Dick Cavett would have on. Dick Cavett was he was a big talk show host, but he would also have reverence for the stars of the 30s and 40s, same as Gilbert would. And he would have on Sid Caesar and Milton Berle and Groucho Marx. But at that point, Groucho, and he would also have Mo from the Three Stooges. But at that point, Groucho was withering. He wasn't completely out of it, but he wasn't as zippy and as peppy as he once was. And his stories would kind of drone on, but Dick Cavett wouldn't interrupt him because it's Groucho Marx. You're just going to let him go. So Gilbert picked up on that, and he would start to talk like this. And then the way Gilbert did the impersonation of old Groucho was talking about things, the way things were back in my day. In my day, we would have these things called automobiles, and they would get you from one place to the other without walking. Now, how would they do that? Well, you put in this fuel, you see, called gasoline. And gasoline, in those days, they came leaded and unleaded. The unleaded, it turned out, was better and cheaper. And then that's what we use now, is the unleaded gasoline. Now, we did that instead of walking. Now, walking in those days.
See, I was not. I'm looking at you like I didn't want my face to at all indicate to stop, because if that went on for the next half hour, I wouldn't have edited any of that out. And if you go back, if you have no life like me, and you want to go back and watch some Dick Cavett interviewing Groucho on the YouTubes, that's pretty spot on. I'm just gonna throw Joe a softball here. Joe, I don't know if it's his favorite thing on the planet, but if it's not, it's damn close. Game shows. And Gilbert became one of those shows up on every game show type personalities. But his appearances, and one in particular on Hollywood Squares, is probably one of the greatest moments, not in game show history, in television history.
Yeah. So Hollywood Squares, originally back in the 70s. No, so Hollywood Squares started in the 60s with Paul Lynde, and Peter Marshall was the host. And then it was revived in the 80s with John Davidson, Shadow Stevens, and Joan Rivers was like a big guest on that iteration. And then it went into another version hosted by Tom Bergeron in the late 90s. And that's when Gilbert Gottfried was brought on as a kind of a regular panelist. And he loved doing that show. He loved doing that show because it was like riffing with other comedians. And he knew how to play the game. He knew that the game was set up so that if you knew you're trying to stump the contestant, you're trying to fool the contestant into thinking that you know or don't know what you're talking about, so that they'll vote opposite and get it wrong, or to basically make it difficult. And so there was one moment where Gilbert Gottfried was surprisingly the last square to need to be picked in order to complete the puzzle, and he was chosen not once, not twice, I think 8 times, and they couldn't end the game because you can't just automatically, if you lose the question, it doesn't automatically go to the opponent. You have to win the square. And Gilbert was the only square left on this fucking board, and by law, they had to have him end on a correct answer.
Both needed him to get 3 across.
Yes. Okay. So go on YouTube and watch the whole thing. But Tom Bergeron asks a question, multiple question. What was the name of the name of the island that was covered, destroyed by the volcano in 29 AD? And Gilbert would say that was the Fiji Islands, and the person would say, I agree. You fool! And it was Pompeii.
He would say it so convincing. He would, the standard thing, throw a question. The first thing you say is a joke. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And then he would think about it. It's like, yeah, no, I know this because I studied this, or I knew about it. Oh, there's this great document. He sold it. He didn't just throw out an answer. And who else was, it's funny because one of the other squares was Whoopi Goldberg, who also went on to host.
She was an executive producer.
She
produced the Hollywood Squares. Yeah.
Teller was on it from Penn and Teller.
You mean Penn?
Yes.
It'd be a little bit different.
Not that
I
good
think it
on
was
the game
Penn.
shows.
Literally, I think it was Penn and Teller.
Okay.
Sharing the square. So you get half a.
But it was all these other comics.
Bruce Valanche, of course.
The best. But yeah, that has to be. I mean, you put that top 10 game show moments, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's going to be played ad infinitum on YouTube. Like, I think if once YouTube gets bought out by Disney and Disney wipes everything off of YouTube, that will remain. Like that, and maybe something like some cat video will remain on YouTube.
So it's funny you say Disney. What a nice segue. Gilbert Gottfried being the darling of Disney. Who would have thought? Like, even he's like, you want to put me in a G-rated Disney movie? Okay.
Yeah. And that's, I think, probably where most kids in my age and younger first heard of Gilbert Gottfried probably would be as the voice of Iago, not a parrot. I mean, is it a parrot? I forget. Iago the bird from Aladdin, who was he was the cohort of Jafar, the evil prince, or what? Oh no, what was he? What was he in Jafar? I don't know.
He was the Sultan's
like
advisor.
Exactly right. He was like trying to overthrow and take over. But him. I'm molting. Oh, great! I'm gonna have a heart attack and die from that surprise. That kind of stuff.
Not surprised.
Yeah. so he became, and he would go on to do like the voice of Iago for like, the video game and the direct to DVD sequel. And maybe, I think they made 2 sequels. I don't know. And then he would go on to play a bird later on the TV show Cyber Chase on PBS with opposite Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, that's great. It's a lot of things went around in the past week of Gilbert. Funny clips from Howard Stern and the different shows he's been on. It was one of those get out the tissues. I think it was like Rex Chapman. I saw it on his Twitter feed. Guess it was some autistic adult who had some lost speech, whatever he's battling. He lost speech. And one of the ways he learned to re-speak, for some reason, he really gravitated to that character from Aladdin. And he's doing that. There's like some get together where all these, am I right to say autistic kids or kids with, autism were getting together and kind of doing a script reading of this along with a screening of the movie. And when one of the long, passages from that character came in, Gilbert came in doing the voice. And the kids just lost it. I mean, and Gilbert obviously realized what he meant to that kid. And it's one of those things where you might, Gilbert has the claim to fame of being the first comic canceled on Twitter, or getting himself canceled because of his tweets with the tsunami in Japan. But he was the
voice of the Aflac duck. And he was dropped by Aflac after that.
But he did. All these stories come out of the stuff you don't hear about that he would show up for these events. That wasn't the one and only time he was a really decent human being. I mean, I guess he was a pretty good guy.
Well, yeah, and then he also did in a good documentary. It closes with him doing a benefit stand up at a St. Jude fundraiser because his sister was diagnosed with cancer, and I guess they felt that was something that he wanted to do some charity for. So yeah, like as cheap as he was with himself and his purchases, he wasn't so much with his comedy and his celebrity, Right. I'm going to confess something now that I don't think I told you.
Okay.
And it's me being cheap. I pulled a Gilbert on myself. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. But the very next day, no. So I think it was either last Christmas or the one before. I think maybe the one before that. I went onto Gilbert's Cameo site, and for $150, I almost bought a cameo for Carnival personnel.
Oh,
to say like
you're killing me.
To say you I'm never coming back kind of thing. Like basically having Gilbert saying,
shit on him.
Just shit on us. Yeah.
And
I just like, you know what? I can't. And I just didn't. I couldn't do it. And I had like, the little blurb written out, and I'm trying to like play it out, like how he's going to interpret the way I'm putting the notes together, and if he's going to do it or whatever. And I'm like, and I think it was close to Christmas time. Anyway, I don't know. And I just like, I just didn't do it.
If you could go back 20 years, 30 years ago and have bought an Apple stock or gotten Gilbert to do this cameo, which would you choose?
Oh, I do the cameo. Yeah,
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Oh, you fool!
You fool! Yeah, so I'm sorry. I had to use to make this tribute to Gilbert and sort of an in memoriam to Gilbert even sadder. I had to break that news to you. I almost had a Gilbert cameo for Carnival personnel, and although there was a funny video I saw of Gilbert doing a cameo for this guy who every Christmas he gives his sister the Biggest Bitch Award. And so he taped one Christmas, I think Christmas or birthday, he taped his sister coming to the living room and sitting in front of a TV with like a package in front of her. And it's Gilbert's, cameo on the TV. And he says, "Your brother, Frank, wanted to say happy birthday or Merry Christmas, and he wants you to open the package and see what he got you this year. And she opens the package, and it's like, you won the biggest bitch award. You're the biggest bitch. Happy birthday or Merry Christmas, And it was like the sweetest present she'd ever gotten from her brother.
Great. So her brother was willing to pay. Okay, all right.
Hey, maybe if we got some money from this podcast, from those defunct sponsors.
You stop letting me use the defunct sponsors.
We're blowing it all on Stella Artois and Dr. Pepper. I'm so sorry, though. I really am.
Yeah, no.
And you know what? Like, of all the nice presences, from all the after all the good things you've gotten me over the years, and some of the good things I've gotten you, that's one that just slipped away.
Just got away.
God damn it!
Oh no! Now. But they say it's the thought that counts. They lie.
Yeah.
they
do you want me to do a cameo as Gilbert Gottfried?
Yes, I do. I'm very. Well, hold on. I'll go sign up for the app, and I'll get. I'll find the Joe, and I'll have the Joe do it. So Joe and I have always liked Gilbert. That's obvious. His podcasts. Sometimes, if I didn't know the person, I listened to probably 2/3 of them. But there are some episodes of his podcast which are just. I've gone back and re-listened to a number of times. Some of them are surprising one, like the one with Mike Nesmith was really, really good. Mike Nesmith of the Monkees. But Gilbert did get repetitive. And he would make almost the same jokes every episode. And I'm going to leave this to Joe to see if he wants to go deeper into this. But one of my favorite tweets about him dying is, what do you think the first 3 questions Gilbert asks God when he gets up there? Do you see that tweet? Like, it was a big person.
No. Where am I going? Where are you going?
What are the 3 things that he mentioned almost every podcast?
I mean, about the Cesar Romero.
Yep, that's one.
Cesar Romero had boy toys that he hired to every once in a while. He would stand in a pool of water and have these boy toys throw orange wedges at his bare ass. That was one apocryphal thing. Mm-hmm. The other was what was it? The Condolences monkeys?
No.
Okay, no, that didn't make the top 3. What?
St. Jude's.
Oh God, yes, Danny Thomas. Well, that's a street story that everybody knows. Danny Thomas of Make Room for Daddy, founder of St. Jude's Hospital, that he did a benefit for Gilbert Gottfried, would allegedly like to hire prostitutes and have them stand over coffee tables under which he would lie and have them defecate through these glass coffee tables.
It's not us making it up. Look, go look it up. What is, I think he phrased this, what is the Danny Thomas?
And what about helicopter?
And the kind of guilt that makes you build children's hospitals.
That's Jim Carrey's line.
And then the last one is Marlon Brando.
Oh, that's a new one. The Quincy Jones story about Marlon Brando. Quincy Jones was interviewed about 5 years ago, and he blurted out that he knows for a fact that Marlon Brando, I don't know if he witnessed it or if he just knew that Marlon Brando and Richard Pryor got high once and had sex with each other. And Gilbert found that very eye-opening.
Let that one go.
No.
That wound up being part of his OCD repertoire, that he would just have random guests on, and if the guests knew the story about Danny Thomas or about Richard Pryor,
Cesar Romero,
they would be like, "Oh yeah, no, that's weird. Right? Let's move on." And if they didn't, the delight! And sometimes the producer or his co-host Frank would try to kind of reel him in a bit, and then there's sometimes it's like, "All right, just let him get it out of his suit." He rejoiced so much in telling those stories.
What was the Mike Nesmith story where he was on a plane with Mike Nesmith, and was it Gilbert who was on a plane, and Gilbert was reading a script for like some really like shitty movie, and he gives the plot of the movie to Mike Nesmith, and Mike Nesmith goes, "Sounds like a piece of shit," and it was. It was a shitty movie.
Look up Gilbert's IMDb page. It's amazing how much work he did.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, he played in the Problem Child movies. He played the
so
two different characters
so great.
in two different movies.
So great.
What else? I mean, more recently he played Abraham Lincoln. He did a cameo as Abraham Lincoln in A Million Ways to Die in the West, the Seth MacFarlane Western.
Didn't he also reprise his Abe Lincoln on Jimmy Kimmel? I think he was Abe Lincoln on Jimmy Kimmel as well.
He played Adolf Hitler in a historical roast of Anne Frank.
Yeah.
I guess Jeff Ross, who produced those things. Jeff Ross, he's another podcast altogether. I guess Jeff Ross was like with Gilbert towards the end. Oh. Like he was that close with Gilbert. I'm not sure where he passed, if it was in Florida or not. He'd been living in Florida in his final, months. As that's where Jews go to die, I guess. And a lot of other people, but
he'd be the first to tell you, if he wasn't dead.
Yeah, right. God, I mean, there's just what else from Gilbert? I mean, you see him on like, the Norm Macdonald talk show, the Late Night with David Letterman. I mean, he just made so many appearances on so many different panel shows. He would just pop up just everywhere. I mean, even after he was canceled by Affleck, he, because of the podcast and stuff, kind of stayed in the zeitgeist and kind of stayed in the public eye and in the people's consciousness.
I mean, up until a few months ago, maybe it's a little longer ago, because I think we thought about going and seeing him. He was in New Hampshire maybe a year or so ago.
Yeah.
I mean, he was still a touring comic. I think, I'm going to end the podcast going out on, I don't want to say it's a line that Joe and I say all the time. I'll just, at least once a month, I'll just text Joe 4 words. That's a punchline to one of Gilbert's jokes. And I don't want to say it now because it gives it away, but it's one of those jokes the F&H listeners will appreciate. It's like a Paul LeGroix joke where it can be a 20-minute joke or a 20-second joke. And I think this is about a 5-6 minute clip that's worth the payoff. It's worth the payoff. I regret that I didn't see him do stand-up. I mean, I don't regret that I didn't get him to do a camp, but I didn't even think about that. I don't even think about, oh yeah, we could have got Ed Astor to do it, because all those people do.
There's a video, speaking of his cameo, that I just discovered. There's somebody put together a metal cover of the song to Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat, the game.
Yeah.
And in the game, in the song, the big hook was a guy yelling, "Mortal Kombat!" Well, they would get Gilbert Gottfried to read all of the lines from Mortal Kombat and then incorporate that into the song. But they wanted him to yell Mortal Kombat, kind of like how it was done in the song. But instead, they got a good reading, but it was more like Mortal Kombat.
They got Gilbert reading it.
Yeah. And then they show him popping up and doing the lines and incorporating it into the song. And it's a really good cover. It's like a 4-minute song. And then at the end of the video, you see the unedited cameo of all of the line reading, all of the disjointed line readings. And he's literally he's like Ron Burgundy. Somebody mistyped the word excellent. It's supposed to be read excellent. And he read it as Excel NT because somebody mistyped excellent. So he literally just read what he saw.
That's great.
And he didn't even know what he was reading. He could have read White
I'm
Power.
Burgundy?
Yeah, right. Who put a question mark in there? Fred Willard, another great person gone. And by the way, I will bring up the eeriness of Norm Macdonald, Bob Saget, Louis Anderson, and Gilbert Gottfried all dying within a year of each other. And there's like a photo of like three of those guys
Louis
together.
Anderson, right?
Louis,
Bob.
Gilbert, and Bob together in a picture, and that was like tweeted out. He actually, I think Gilbert tweeted that out like 3 weeks prior to his death. So
they say they said it with Norm. They said it with Bob Einstein, and it's true. There's not going to be another Gilbert. There's not. I mean, he created a market for himself. I mean, nobody wrote lines. Gilbert never did a role that I don't think was written for Gilbert. You know what I mean?
Right. Although he was told that he would have been a good Penguin by Adam West.
Yeah. And
he was almost cast as Flat Top or Mumbles in the Dick Tracy movie. But then he did remember the story he told on the podcast about how, he read for the part. And the producers were like, "That's so great! It's a done deal. We can't wait to be working with you. You're such a great fit." And then weeks go by and nothing is heard from regarding the movie or the filming or when things are going to start. And then all of a sudden, he hears that his role was recast, and the part went to Dustin Hoffman, which, as he put it, is the only time you heard his name and Dustin Hoffman's name in the same sentence. Basically, the sentence being, we heard Gilbert Gottfried, and he's no Dustin Hoffman.
Joe, thank you for making the incredulous journey over here. Any last thoughts on? Because I do. It's a shame because he's probably. Like I said, I didn't love every podcast he did. I'm not saying everything he ever did was great, but 2 out of every 3, were worth listening to, and 1 out of every 10 I would re-listen to a few times.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go back and start listening to some of the hits. I mean, him with Artie Lang. Yeah. Oh my, they're just so good together. They were good on the
Christmas episodes
with Mario Cantone are great. Yeah, I mean, I do want to, and I'm a nobody. You're a nobody. We're both 2 nobodies talking to nobody. But I do want to just state on the record that I do have offer condolences to anybody affected by Gilbert in Gilbert's family, Frank, anybody that worked with him. It's a huge loss. I can't imagine them, what they're feeling. His kids. The kids are teenagers,
early teenagers,
and he lost his father when he was a teenager, and his dad was 66.
His sister passed away early too, or I don't think anybody in the family made 70.
Yeah, I'm not sure how. And his sister had actually passed during the making of that documentary, right. And they dedicated the movie to her. Arlene and Gottfried, great photographer, amazing photographer, won awards. But anyways, yeah, I mean, it's sad. It was a real, I think. Knock on wood. This is not wood, but I'm pretending it is. I hope I die before Weird Al Yankovic dies.
Oh,
I do not because Gilbert was a bummer, but it was getting pretty close. It's not like John Ritter dying and Jimmy Kimmel going on air the next day and crying about it. I'm not there with Gilbert, but he was about as close as he's probably one of the best comedians that are just the close.
We talk about Gilbert every week.
The comedian that I'm most engaged with.
I mean, because of his podcast, we talk about his podcast on a regular basis between us. Did you hear this? No, you have to listen to this one. Like I said, thank you, and you fool, and the punchline to the joke I'm going to play at the end. Those are 3 things that either I text Joe texts me on a weekly basis. Dude, I don't even want to think how you're going to be when Weird Al goes.
Luckily, he's a very healthy man who doesn't have cancer in his family or anything like that. So I don't want to make this about, people I don't want to see die. But yeah, I mean, Gilbert was, and it just came out of nowhere. And it's just yeah.
Like Norm Macdonald, he kept it quiet.
Yeah.
Like nobody outside his small bubble. They never hinted about it on the show.
Right. And I guess, because I mean, really, in the end, why do that? Like, why hang that over your fans and the public's head? Like, why? Like,
Yeah,
what?
every interview would be people asking about it or what. Well,
I mean, unless you're like Glenn Campbell and you're going out like with Alzheimer's or something, and he wants to like say goodbye, kind of thing, which in and of itself is amazingly sad. But if something like this is happening, where it's just like, well, I'm gonna go on and soldier on and do my best to stay healthy and keep working with dates on the books until it, things stop.
well,
I don't know. I don't know how to end this. It's kind of like,
yeah, no, I the only good thing about these is I get you to come over here and do the podcast. So that's always a little risk.
We didn't have podcasts. We had radio, and radio back in those days, you had to sit down and listen. You couldn't even listen in your car yet. When the radio first came out, they were the size of ovens, and you'd sit around in your living room and listen to the president. The president would talk all day long on the radio, and you look forward to that, listening to the president on the radio. But that's what we listened to. And then I got on the radio, and it was a good. I thought it was a good thing, but we didn't have podcasts. We went from the radio we went into pictures. You see, and I made some pictures with my brothers. We called ourselves the Marx Brothers because we were all named Marx. Well, they said they called me Groucho because they said I had a grouchy attitude. And then I had a brother named Harpo. And it's because they played the harp, you see. And we called him Harpo. Now, we also had a brother named Chico. And they said, well, why, they said to us, why would Chico, why'd you put him in these pictures? And I tell him, because Chico needed the money, you see. And so we did the pictures with, there was another brother there, his name was Zeppo. Yeah, Zeppo, we was one of the Marx Brothers, you see. And now 4 of us, we'd get together and we'd do these pictures, moving pictures. They would move on the screen. It would be projected from this device called the projector. And it would be flickering lights, you see. And it would look like they were moving pictures on the screen. Now, you'd sit and you watch these pictures in a place called a theater. And then so in my day, you would watch these movies not on a telephone like you do nowadays. You're sitting down and you dress yourself up. You go out and you pay a nickel or a dime and you go in the door. You get yourself a refreshment maybe, like a licorice or cigarettes or you get yourself, we said they call them the seltzers, tonic waters. And you sit down in these things called theaters. In the theaters, they have lots of chairs. Not like the chairs in your dining room, They'd have them side by side, you see. And you'd sit there with rows of chairs. So many chairs. And you sit down and you watch them.
I'm not editing any of that.
And then they'd say, then my mother would tell me these wonderful stories and things back in her day. What would she say? She would say, don't forget.
An old Jewish woman brings her grandson to the beach, her 3-year-old grandson. The old Jewish woman falls asleep in the sand, and the grandson starts wandering off. A wave sweeps him up and drags him further and further out into the water. The Jewish woman is yelling, "Save my grandson!" And a man runs forward, leaps in the water, and is swimming against the currents. And the waves are knocking him against the rocks. And he's getting all bloody. Then he finally swims out, grabs the little boy, lifts him up out of the water. A giant shark starts coming at them. And the man starts beating off the shark. Well, I don't mean beating off the shark. Because if you beat off the shark, that would make the shark stick around. So he's beating off the shark, and the shark's going, no. He's punching. Wait, should I start from the beginning? There are two sharks there now, and one is fingering the pussy, the other he's beating off, and he's talking dirty. Yeah, that's it. I'm fingering your pussy, you fucking shark-toothed bitch, and I'm beating you off. Fuck you, bitch. Okay, where was I? So he's holding the little kid, he brings him to the shore, and he drops him on the sand, and then the kid's not breathing, and he's pumping his arms up and down. Finally, the boy spits up water, and he's alive. And the beach is cheering, and the old Jewish grandmother goes, "He had a hat."